Hi, welcome to the BYU-Idaho Tutoring Center videos. Today we're going to be talking about population regulation. So this is a common theme in biology, this idea of regulation feedback. So if you remember back to those BYU-Idaho days when you were talking about enzymes and cellular respiration, remember that there was different things that would happen to regulate those enzymes and those processes. And this is a common thing in biology. Just like we regulate those things in a cell, we also have to regulate those things in a population. And one of them that we're going to be talking about is the size of a population and how we regulate it. So to start off, we're going to be talking about density independent. So density independent things occur when the birth or the death rate don't change with the population size. And so on a test or quiz, you probably be asked to identify some sort of density independent factor. So that's going to be something that's not going to affect the size, that's not going to be a result of the size of the population. It's going to affect everything the same no matter what the population size. So examples of this are like fire and drought, usually natural disasters, because they will happen across the population equally, depending on, regardless of if we have a large population or a small population. The opposite of this is density dependent factors, or density dependent, and that occurs when our birth and death rate are affected when our population changes. So they'll either rise or decrease with a change in the population size. And so for a given population, you can have a density independent birth rate and density dependent death rate. You could have a density independent death rate and a density dependent birth rate, or you can have both of them be density dependent or both of them be density independent. It really just depends on the situation. So we talked about a couple of things that are density independent. Now we're going to talk about 6 density dependent factors, or things that will influence the birth and death rate with the change in the population size. And so this is kind of the explanation for carrying capacity. This is why populations cannot keep growing indefinitely, why there is a limit to their growth, and it's because of these 6 factors here. So the first one is competition for resources. As we increase our population, we start to have a limited number of nutrients and resources that these individuals need, and they're competing for them, and some of them are not going to be able to get everything they need. So some of them are going to be die off or have increased death rates because they can't get the food and the water or the other things that they need, or the space. And also maybe this inability to get the resources they need could cause decreased birth rates as well, which is overall going to decrease the population growth. The next one is territoriality. And so this occurs when different organisms need their own kind of space to have the resources that they need and the abilities that they need. And so if we have too many organisms or in a population and we only have a certain location where that population can live, then we're going to run out of space for them to have their own territory. And so if they're not able to all have their own territory, a lot of them aren't going to be able to perhaps have the mating grounds they need. This is a common example of territoriality, is to have their own nesting grounds. And so if they don't have their own nesting grounds, then we're going to have decreased birth rates, or we could even have decreased death rates if they don't have their own space. The third one's disease. As we increase population, there's a higher chance of having disease spread among the population, and so that's going to increase the death rate, and it can also decrease the birth rate as well. And so an example of this is the lung disease tuberculosis among humans. It's more likely to spread to more of the population when we have it in a highly populated dense area, or more densely populated area, than a more rural area. The next one's predation. So as we have more individuals in a population, and if they're a prey to some predator, then the predator is going to have more resources or more food, and so it's going to start being able to eat more of them, and so then the population is going to decrease because the death rate is going to increase. And this could result in the predator population rising, and as the predator population rising, they're going to continue to be attacking more of the prey, and so the prey population is going to decrease. And so again, this is going to be decreasing death rates, and so that's we're going to be having this regulation back to our population size. The next one is toxic waste. So we have increased number of organisms in our population. We're going to have more toxic waste, or some sort of waste material, whatever that is, for the individual in the population. And if we have too many organisms in our population, the environment might not be able to take care of all that toxic waste in the natural ways that it usually does, and it can end up poisoning the organisms. And so we see this a lot in laboratory experiments with microorganisms. They will continue to grow and grow and grow, and then they'll be producing some sort of output of waste that will eventually poison them and kill the majority of them. So our death rate is going to increase a lot, and the population is going to kind of stop growing. The last one is intrinsic factors. And so the first 5 we've been talking about have all been environmental factors. This last one is going to be a physiological thing that occurs within the organism of the population. So sometimes when we increase the population, the organisms have some sort of physical response that keeps them from continuing reproducing or increases their likelihood of death. So a really cool example of this is in some type of mice. When the population grows to a certain extent, where it gets to about its carrying capacity, some of the mice will have this stress syndrome that will be started. And what this stress syndrome will result in is some hormones that will decrease the ability of reproductive organs, and it won't let them develop as well, and it can even cause a deficient immune system. And so as a result, these mice tend to have, or start to have, decreased birth rates and increased death rates with this change. And so it's really fascinating that even organisms themselves within the population can have their own regulation feedback, and it's not always with the environment. So now we're going to kind of move on and talk about some population dynamics. So this is kind of going into how the biotic and abiotic factors of a certain area are going to influence the change in the population. And so we see some populations that remain pretty stable throughout the years. We see some populations that fluctuate from year to year. And ecologists like to understand why that is happening. And so one of the reasons that we found some abiotic factors are things like weather. Depending on the weather of the year, the season, we could have more of the nutrients we need or the circumstances that we need to allow the population to continue to grow. However, if we don't have the weather we need for that year or that time period, we can have some problems, and so then we can have fluctuating population sizes. And so that's kind of almost more like a density independent factor, potentially. And then a really interesting one is the correlation with predator or prey. So I mentioned here, when we're talking about predation, that if we have a high population of prey, then the predator is going to have more food to eat, and it's going to grow in size, and it's going to decrease the prey population. So a lot of times we actually see this negative correlation between the size of the predator population and the size of a certain prey population. So I drew this little graph up here, and the red represents the prey and the blue represents the predator. So if we start off with a sort of low prey population and it starts to grow, what could happen is the prey population will start to grow, and as it grows, the predator will have more food to eat, and so we'll start eating more of the prey. And as it has this more food to eat, it can grow in its population because now it has more resources. But as it grows in its population, it might get so big that it's eaten off so many of the prey that now there's not enough resources. So the prey population is now decreased, the predator is now increased, but now there's not enough nutrients for the prey. So what might start to happen is a lot of the predators are starting to die off because they don't have the nutrients they need. And as the predators start to die off again, then the prey can start to increase because there's not as much predators attacking them. And then it will happen again. The predators will go back and the prey. And so we have this kind of negative correlation between the two that's really fascinating. And there's been lots of laboratory experiments done that have watched this correlation over the years. And so finally, we're going to kind of come back to this idea of immigration and immigration. For most of our talk of populations and regulation and science, we've kind of ignored it and just been focusing on death rates and birth rates. But keep in mind that this is important, and that especially when we're talking about metapopulations. And remember, metapopulation is just a number of local populations that are linked together and interact with immigration and immigration. And so as we have individuals potentially immigrating out and into populations, we can have changes occur in the population dynamics. So that's really all for today. I hope it was helpful. I hope you have a better understanding of density independent and density dependent factors. Make sure you know these 6 factors and keep in mind some of the density independent factors that we talked about, and really understanding this correlation between predator and prey that can occur Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.